Okay, if nobody else needs to be added in, you guys are good to go.
Okay, just one more thing here, Sean. So the phone number 201-4367, I'm not sure who that is, so that might be someone for public comment.
Okay. Do you want to check who it is right now, or do you want to just check a public comment?
We can check right now.
I'm not seeing a phone number on my list.
Oh, no.
Becky and I are the only ones that can see it because we're the hosts.
Oh, because they're in the waiting room.
It just switched to Jim Johnson?
Oh, I think he just maybe joined because the phone number's still there.
It could be Greg, so you should check with the phone number who they are. And they probably joined, even if they're public, they're allowed to be here, right?
Well, they're supposed to be watching on YouTube, not supposed to be in the meeting until the public comment section.
That could be one of our board members then.
Hi, 201-4367. Can you hear us?
You talking to me?
No, there's a phone number. We're trying to figure out who it is.
Oh, okay.
Unless Jim is on by phone and by computer.
Yeah, I finally got on. I don't know what was going on.
I think his audio is coming from the computer.
That's trying to lock me out.
201-4367. Are you there?
Yep, this is me, Jen Tucker at MEDC.
Oh, Jen.
Oh, hi, Jen.
Hi.
Good morning.
Well, I'm glad it was her. We were just talking about her.
I missed it. I tried to Zoom and then I didn't hear anything, so I thought I'd try the number.
Perfect. Hey, Jen, how about we do this? We just have a couple things to go through on the agenda, and then we'll bring you back in when it's time for the presentation.
Totally fine. Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you in a minute.
We ready?
Okay, we're ready.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Apologize for the little bit of confusion and our late start, but we'll get going and catch up here real soon. Rebecca, can you do the roll call? Can you see everybody that's attending the meeting for roll call for our board members?
Yes, let's see. So I've got Tony, Mike, Jeremy, Jack, Karen, Jim, Sean, Nicole. So I do not see Greg, and I have not heard from him.
Jeremy, is he on?
Jeremy's here.
Okay.
I'm here. Come
Thank
on,
you.
Tony.
Couldn't see it
Get
there.
your computer.
There you are. So with that, we have one person that's absent. That's Greg, and I guess we'll hold off on that and find out if he's going to join us a little bit later and see what happens. He did not call in, Rebecca?
No, he did not.
If I recall, he wasn't at the last meeting as well.
That's correct, Tony.
Okay. We'll move on to public comment. Sean indicated there wasn't any public. Has anybody joined us from the public that you know of?
Becky, do you know who Rob is in the waiting room?
Yes, he's part of our consultant team.
Okay, so everybody is then?
Yes.
Okay, then nobody's there.
Okay, thank you. We'll move right down to item 4, the consent agenda. It includes the minutes from 5/14, bills for approval, financial reports as of 5/31. Is there a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as written.
Jeremy, thank you. Karen supported. So we have Jeremy and Karen supporting the consent agenda as it was submitted to us. All in favor by aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move right down to item 5, which is the downtown plan presentation from Smith Group. And Rebecca, I'll turn this over to you. You can take it.
So we have with us today Bob Doyle and Kaylee Hines from Smith Group, as well as Rob Bassigalupi, who's also part of our consultant team. He's with Mission North. So we'll bring them on board. Sean's still here? Perfect. Okay. Can you guys hear us okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So with that, I just did a brief introduction, so I'll turn it over to you, Bob.
Okay. Thanks. Welcome, everybody. Sorry we're not there in person, but I think you're safer for keeping us out of Marquette.
That part's true. I believe that.
So since our meeting in January, we've been working on different strategies for a number of topics, which we're going to talk about today. And so we just wanted to have a report in on where we are with some preliminary recommendations. And what we really want to focus on today are some things that we have some options on. So we'd like to get your feedback on, you know, is this the right direction? Is that the right direction? Or do we need to, you know, think about things a little bit more? We'd like to meet with some stakeholder groups, some of the same people we met with in January, later on this month, and give them an update as well and get some input. But we wanted to touch base with you guys first. So we're going to walk through a slideshow, and it's interactive. So I hope you all have your cell phones, because we're going to be asking you to vote on a couple of things. It won't be hard. If you've texted before, you'll get it. So which would exclude the only person I know who hasn't texted yet is my mother. So if you haven't, don't admit it. So anyway, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to walk through the presentation. Okay, can you guys all see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Excellent. So we're going to try to make this interactive as we go through it. And at any point, you know, if you don't understand something, if you have a question, just simply say, you know, it's time for you to stop talking, Bob. I gotta have something explained to me. I don't talk very quickly, so there's usually a pretty good chance you can interrupt me. So let's start out with the big picture type of things. What makes Marquette unique? You guys know what makes Marquette unique. These are all actually things that we talked about back in October of last year. It is a unique and vibrant community in the Upper Peninsula and in the state of Michigan. You do face some challenges in downtown in particular. And these, again, are some things that we talked about in October, and also some things that we heard from the stakeholders that we met with in January. And some of it's a little bit of our own professional opinion or a sense of things. So is anything on there? I don't want to read it because that gets pretty darn boring, but is anything on there seem out of place? Is anything on there something you want to talk about?
I think it's a pretty good summary.
Okay. Good. I think some of the things that we heard from stakeholders that we hadn't talked about with you guys so much is the demand for housing and the need for affordable housing. We heard a lot from people who organize events in town that, you know, they could use some better spaces to have events. The farmers market's kind of outgrown the plaza at the Commons, et cetera. But amazing amount of consistency when we talk to the stakeholders and with you guys in terms of outlook on the community. And I think almost everyone to the person was very positive about Marquette and its future. So we have done a little bit of an analysis of downtown, and from an urban planning and economic development perspective. Having a downtown and a strong central city that's surrounded by residential districts and a great healthcare facility and a university are all super assets, and the street grid connects everybody to downtown very, very well. There's the fact that you have a university is an incredible community anchor for employment and for culture. I'm sure it poses some challenges having your population nearly double every fall, but it provides a great anchor for the community. 3rd Street, I think, is an interesting one, and I'm interested to hear what your perspective is, but we heard pretty clearly that traditionally 3rd Street was more student focused, and downtown was the downtown core, I should say, was geared more towards residents. But now we're hearing that those lines are blurring. You're getting more students and student families coming into downtown, and you're finding more people, long-term residents, using 3rd Street. Does that ring true, or has there always been a bit of a blending of the market, if you will?
I don't think it's quite as true now as it was in the past. I think your line there, your words, the lines are blurring, are really true, because there are a lot of college students that go down onto Washington Street as well as on 3rd Street.
Cool. Good.
I think they just, I think it's true, but I think that both of them have a different atmosphere. The downtown has a different atmosphere than the 3rd Street corridor does.
How would you describe that?
Downtown is a little bit more established. The long-term residents do frequent it a lot more. I don't know whether there's as much university involvement. 3rd Street is a little more, for lack of a better term, a little more funky. It's not quite as walkable. It's just, I don't know how else to describe it. It's got a different feel to it. It's a different atmosphere.
Well, it's interesting that you use the word funky, because that's the word that kept coming to me too. And I mean that in a positive sense. It almost has kind of a college town vibe to it that you would expect. Oh, and by the way, I got going. I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Bob Doyle. I'm with Smith Group. With me is Kaylee Hines, who's an urban planner with Smith Group. Say hi, Kaylee.
Hey, all. I think we met once before when we all came in for the stakeholder meetings, but it's been some time since then. So it's good to see you all again, virtually at least.
And then Rob Bacciagalupi is on the line from Mission North, and he is an economic redevelopment expert and urban planner, and he works out of Traverse City. So say hello, Rob.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you.
My apologies for being remiss in that duty.
Bob, I just have a real quick technical comment. Right now it's showing the presentation view or the presenter's view. So if you want to switch to the other screen so that we can get a more blown up picture of the map, I think people would be able to see the maps a little bit more.
Okay.
If we can really test your technical skills here.
It's going to be a test, because I've never had that happen.
So maybe
click on the display settings where your mouse was a second ago.
Yeah.
No, up at the top.
Oh, okay.
And then just say, yeah, swap that.
There we go.
You got the full screen. Now you could probably read it.
I wasn't going to say anything, but thank you. And
Wasn't going to
Bob,
say anything because I thought Angela would quip about my age and say something about not being able to see that.
I didn't think you could see it through your bangs, you know, without the haircut.
Oh.
Hey, soon as Nixon pulls the troops out of Vietnam, I'm getting a haircut.
Yeah.
Not going in the minutes.
I'm going to remember that one. I keep joking with people that my hair has not been this long since 1975. You know?
Neither has mine. That's exactly when mine changed. But if I could just add one more comment to your last, Bob, and Karen's, the downtown attraction for the college kids is, in my opinion, purely the bars and the restaurants. You know, they're the restaurants down there, or the bars down there, especially, I think, are more, I don't want to say kid friendly, but more of a hotspot for the college kids. And what I've noticed over the years is that with the drunk driving and all the emphasis put on that kind of thing, that the foot traffic at night, you know, at bar closing between the university and the downtown is pretty significant.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that means the kids are walking. They're willing to walk that distance, which is kind of weird, but
that's saying something, though.
Yeah.
They must really want to be downtown.
Yeah, and as someone who lives at the corner of 3rd and Washington, I can confirm what Mike's saying. A lot of people in the evenings.
Yeah.
I think you're one of them, aren't you, Sean? I've seen you staggering around down there.
It's a short walk. It's a short walk.
Yeah.
Well, and with the dispensaries opening on Washington, that may open up the traffic even a little more, you know. So anyway, from the university.
Yeah, Bob, that's one thing that's changed since our last meeting is that we're now marijuana central, or we're going to be for the county anyway.
How many dispensaries do you have in downtown or in the DDA district? Do you know?
Well, there's going to be 2 that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And they're going to be right across the street from each other down at 5th and Washington.
Okay.
And
right next to our office.
Right next to the office.
Perfect.
Yeah. And then there's going to be 3 more that are down on South Front Street, just outside of the DDA. These are just ones I'm aware of that are going through the permitting process.
Okay.
Well,
And do the ones out on 41, do those deliver?
I don't know if delivery is a legal component. Do you know, Sean?
Yeah, delivery is allowed, at least currently, underneath the COVID-19 stuff. I don't know actually how permitted it's going to be, but yeah,
I just keep seeing one of the trucks in the neighborhood.
Well, quit ordering stuff. You won't see the truck that much.
An ice cream truck for adults.
I was going to say, not from personal experience, but let me just say my best friend, the lawyer, has a regular delivery. So I know it's allowed. So the last point on this slide was that the downtown really is the center of civic life, and that's not always the case for many communities. And I think it's very helpful that you have the governmental center there. It brings people downtown, and it's a good anchor. The historic architecture obviously is critical, and I guess the other thing that I was struck by was how many community events you folks have downtown. Let's keep going. Speaking of walking, the circles that are on the plan there, that's a 5-minute walking radius, so it's 10 minutes from one end to the other. So what you find is that, your downtown core, your traditional downtown and 3rd Street are both really quite linear and spread out. So we've had, we're going to talk a little bit about that in some detail, but it does pose some challenges in terms of providing parking facilities and that sort of thing. But you do have at the core, if my cursor can be activated here, right here at the core, let's say at Front and Washington, you know, you've got more of a traditional downtown with multiple streets and different uses spread out along them. And then you've got Washington that really acts as a little bit of an urban corridor, and then 3rd Street that acts as an urban corridor. So you've got some strong retail areas and blocks, but then you have certain parts of town that, because they're either linear or because you have gaps in the building type and use along the street, you've got gaps where, you know, pedestrians just aren't going to go because it's boring and there's nothing to get to. So we'll talk a little bit about more of that in some detail. So you've got a little bit of a separation between West Washington and the core area, and then of course 3rd Street from the core area. We're very pleased, of course, to see so much of the downtown have residential units on the floors above, because we believe that really helps. But it also seems like there's some more potential there for residential growth in downtown, particularly in light of the demand for housing. So when we look at transportation, you know, you've got on 3rd Street, you've got public transit, you've got on-street parking and a bike lane. And it's a question of how are all those things working together and providing good access. There's a great regional network of trails, you know, the Iron Ore Heritage Trail and the city trails that go along the lakeshore. You know, those are fabulous. But when you get right downtown, you don't have a lot of bike lanes or what we would term generically bike facilities in the downtown. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then you've got one MARC-TRAN route that services downtown and 3rd, but that was brought up fairly regularly that the MARC-TRAN system is underutilized and perhaps not operating to its full potential. How was that? Was that a nice way of saying that?
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, too nice.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah. So from a parking standpoint, you've got parking, the update of the parking study is part of our downtown master plan project. And Tom Brown from Nelson Nygaard is going to be meeting with you in the future to go over some of his recommendations. But generally, his sense is that the parking system's on the right track and needs some tweaking, and supply is reasonably accommodating. But as you know, you're losing some of those parking lots to development, which is again a positive thing, except that there's not really a strong plan for how to replace that parking. So I'm kind of going through the list backwards, I'm sorry. I think the number of people brought up the idea that Marquette should be a park once type of community. So you come in, you park, and then you become a pedestrian for the rest of your time. That's a little bit challenging, and because of some of those blank spots in your retail areas, and then also the linear nature. But I think it's a great goal to have. So if you look at the map, and I'm not sure you can, are you seeing how I'm enlarging it? Is that coming through?
Yes.
So in the dashed lines, what you're seeing are parts along the street wall, or the street, if you will. Street wall is kind of a fancy term of art. It doesn't mean anything unless you're an urban planner. But along the street, you've got gaps, right? So you've got gaps in activity where you have parking that's either public. You've got gaps in activity where you have private development that has parking right out to the street and is more suburban in nature. And so the dashed lines are showing those spots. But what's interesting is if you look at what people see as the real downtown core, it's probably Washington from Front to 3rd, right? Maybe 4th. Yeah, Washington to 4th, let's say. And that's the area that has those fewest of those gaps. And so that informs a little bit some recommendations we're going to have further down the road here. But I just think it's worth kind of pointing that out. And what's interesting to me too is you get out on West Washington and you notice, okay, that's really not an area that's frequented by pedestrians, and you can almost see why, because the development pattern is sort of semi-suburban, semi-urban, and so it's not particularly conducive. 3rd Street, I think, is pretty good, actually. You don't have as many of those gaps. There are a couple blocks on the north end where you've got gas stations and banks and that sort of thing that contribute to that cut up nature. But generally, there are some nice blocks in there. And again, I think the word funky really fits quite well. So now let's see if I can reduce this back to.
So Bob, the dotted lines are the gaps?
Yeah, the dotted lines are the gaps. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So what that does is walkability is a big term that's being used. And if even the real estate ads now, if you go to Zillow and look at your home on Zillow, it'll give your home a walkability score. So it's an important part of what drives people to live in places. So they might, choose Marquette because of its strong downtown center versus Negaunee has less of a critical mass as a downtown, and it feels less walkable. So walkability is becoming an important part of how people select where they want to live.
Yeah, and Bob, it's also a very good indicator of commercial retail success. Retailers look for walk scores of 80 or above now. Used to be 70 above, now it's 80 and above. So walkability has become really important for retail too.
And like Sean, I live in a downtown area, and I think my walkability score is like 92. I'm quite proud of that. And I kind of got a hint from Sean that maybe he takes advantage of that walkability score by, not having to drive home from the tavern. And I have to say that's part of the appeal for me too. Anyway, we'll keep going. So some goals that we've set for the downtown master plan include the following. And in the big picture, it's really about articulating a vision, right? We want a vision for the future that helps guide where you invest as a DDA and as a community in your downtown, how you look at your transportation, streets, and your parking system, and then how you reflect these things in your community policies, your zoning, and your master plan, et cetera. So goal number 1 is stimulate economic development and new economy industries. Goal number 2 is provide a safe and convenient multimodal transportation system, including improved transit. Goal number 3, continue to provide a wide range of housing options that accommodates a variety of generations and lifestyles. 4 is promote continued reinvestment through mixed use infill development. And as we have talked about, I mean, you have a market for that. There are developers who are interested in doing that in town. 5 is connect the downtown core with the lakefront and with the 3rd Street business corridor. And 6, develop a parking management strategy that balances all the needs of visitors, residents, employees, etc. So that was kind of a quick overview of those. Does that seem about right? You want me to go back and look at the other 3? And we'll give you this slideshow so you can edit it at will. Okay, well, I think I'll just keep going then. That's the overarching goals. We have the master plan. We're getting to the fun part here pretty quickly. The master plan has a certain set of recommendations that we will be providing. And those come in 3 different buckets. Improvements to the public realm, which is your streets, your parks, your commons, for instance. And within that bucket, we have 5 different recommendation areas: managing and maintaining streetscapes and parks, reimagine. I can't believe I let that typo go. I never see the typos until I'm presenting. Reimagining the commons area, creating a civic street and humanizing BARAGA, connecting to and improving 3rd Street, and then connecting downtown to the waterfront. So those are we're going to go over some ideas that you might want to consider. And those are things that as a community, you can take on as a project and say, we want to do this. Let's go get some funding through the state or the federal government. Let's figure out how we want to improve our downtown to create a better sense of place. The second bucket we have is transportation. So we'll want to have recommendations on improving the non-motorized network, wayfinding, enhancing public transit, managing parking, and then also looking at potential parking expansion opportunities. And then the third bucket will be recommendations related to municipal policies. So that's economic development strategies, affordable housing strategies, 3rd Street investment, how we can make that happen, street management, snow removal, that sort of stuff, land use regulations, so that's zoning, and then encouraging private development. What are some strategies for doing that? So within those 3 buckets, the text that's highlighted are things that we're going to cover today. The text bullet points that are in dark gray are those items that we will be covering at your July meeting, if that fits. So the stuff that we're doing today that is in color are things that tend to need more direct input, because there are a number of ways we could do things, and a number of ideas and that you could consider. The things that are in gray tend to be more policy oriented things and topics that the devil's in the details. So you need to kind of read the report on parking management and understand it. But it's not something that you're going to go, we could do X, Y, and Z or F. So that's a long way of saying what we're going to do today is the fun stuff. So we're going to show you different opportunities for improving things in downtown. And then we're going to ask you to give us some feedback on what makes the most sense in terms of a direction we might go. So that said, we've been through master planning processes where the result of which is a very specific plan that says we want to, for instance, redo the commons area and we want it to look exactly like this because the community really supports this idea. We've also done master plans where we said, look, the goal is to redevelop the commons area and it could look like A, B, or C. We don't have to necessarily pick, this is exactly what we want to do. So once we go through these options and we're going to do a little voting on them, then we're going to talk a little bit more about how to proceed. For instance, do we go back to the stakeholders and say, these are the ideas that the board supports? Or do we go back to them and say, we have 3 or 4 options on each of these topics and we'd like you to give us your input? So anyway, we'll talk more about what the final strategy is as we get through it. So the first area is to reimagine the commons. It has served as a civic space, an ice skating plaza, and a farmer's market, but it doesn't seem to be doing all of these things well. So it's a multi-use space that is a bit stretched to the limit, if you will. Because it's an ice skating rink, you don't have a lot of landscape, which means in August it's pretty hot. You don't want a lot of trees around it because you don't need leaves and sticks falling into the ice when you're making ice in the winter. As a farmer's market space, it's triangular in shape, so it doesn't really lend itself to a layout of booths, market booths, and access for the farmers to set up tables and have storage for their things that are on deck to be sold. So we heard pretty clearly you ought to think about redoing this. And we think there's a lot of different opportunity there to make some improvements. And I'm sorry, the slideshow seems to have lost the letter A, but the option on the lower left is option A. So let me walk through those really quickly, these different ways of doing this. One way, see if hold on a second here. Trying to get a pointer to work, but it's not going. Okay, so option A in the lower left says, oh, let's redo the plaza part of the plaza directly west of the building and make it more landscaped with trees, and ice rink will have to be handled somewhere else. And then let's take the parking that's just north of the market building and make that actually part of the plaza, so that you pave it in a different material. Maybe it's colored concrete, maybe it's pavers of some kind, and you use that for your market. So on the market days, it's used as market space, and then on the other days, it's just used as a really nice parking lot. Or if you have an event, you can rope it off and it becomes performance space and not parking. So you're basically building this flexible space just to the north of your building. Option 2, or B, in the upper right is looking at, okay, we're going to make the current plaza space really just an open green space with very little development in terms of paving on it. And then we're going to move the farmer's market somewhere else, to be discussed in a moment. And then option C takes a kind of a blend between what you have now and what people had said they were interested in, seeing it more green. So we have a little bit of a paved plaza space right outside the west part of the building, and then we surround that with a nice landscape and shaded spaces for people to gather and enjoy the summer and spring and fall, maybe even the winter if you're a tough youper like you guys are. So any questions on these three different ways of looking at this?
Bob, I have a question. You have like Main Street on B and C, or especially B. Is that turned into a green space, or is that what am I looking at there?
That's turning Main Street into like a festival street, so it works as a street, but then it's designed so that it can be closed off and used for festivals. We're going to talk about that separately.
Okay.
So some of these ideas, we drew them up on one sheet, but then we're kind of breaking it down into individual areas. But that
is it possible for, and I'm just thinking here, like if my preference is A, could Main Street and B be part of A as well?
Yes, that's kind of why we broke it up. Yeah,
all
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Bob, I have a question with your option A.
Yeah.
Where you turn a bit of the plaza into the market plaza. How does that area compare, square footage wise to what we have existing? Like, would we still be able to accommodate the same number of vendors, let's say, for the farmers market with this option as we currently can?
Yeah, you could actually accommodate more. It's probably only, I want to say, 20% bigger, but since it's configured in a rectilinear fashion, you can have a more traditional farmer's market where the farmer, you set up the tents in a row. So you might use, if you can see my cursor, is that showing up on your screen?
No. Once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's probably a way of doing that. Maybe I'll just draw. Oh, here, laser pointer. Now can you see me?
Yeah. Yes, we see you now.
Yay. So what you could do is like the farmers market the farmers would use these stalls to park in and then unload their stuff. And then you'd have a row of stalls here and then a row of stalls here. So because it's linear in nature, it's much more efficient. So you're probably increasing your capacity. Not probably, you are increasing your capacity for number of stalls.
Are we losing parking though too in that plan?
Well, on market day, this would be where the farmers market would happen. So yeah, so in a way you are, because people would have to park elsewhere. And then this becomes the market.
But on non-market days?
But on non-market days, you'd still have meter posts and you would use it just like it was a parking lot.
Okay, that's kind of important, I think.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's probably 70 spaces. You can't afford to lose 70 spaces.
Thank you.
Bob, I have a question. This is Tony. The three scenarios that you present, do they all eliminate the ice rink?
Yes.
And Rebecca, question for you. Do we still flood it and use it in the wintertime?
In all honesty, we haven't had an ice rink for probably 3 years.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, because it's so weather dependent and we just haven't had the consistency of the cold temperatures to keep a solid ice surface. So anytime it gets warmed up, because it's a concrete surface, it just undermines the ice from the concrete up. So yeah, basically we've given up on using it as an ice rink for several years now.
And have we heard from the public as to opposition to us giving that up or any concerns from the public? I don't recall anybody, talking about it.
No, I really haven't heard any feedback in that regard. Also, knowing that there are a couple of other public ice skating options offered through the city, I think that there are other alternatives that people would be happy with.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're gonna do a little bit of a fun thing, which is we're gonna see if there's a consensus among you guys as to which of those options you like, and we'll flash back onto the graphics. So this is the point where you take out your phone, you go to your messaging, and you're going to write a text, and the number you're going to write it to is 22333. So start a new text, and you're sending it to 22333. And then the message you're going to text them is up north, all caps.
All one word?
All one word, up north.
When I typed in that number, I got a dash between the first and second three. Does that matter?
Nope, that's what you're gonna get, yeah.
All right.
Mike, are you using a jitterbug phone?
Actually, it's a rotary phone.
Yeah.
Attaboy.
Trying to figure it out here.
So when you do that, you're gonna get a message that says you've joined the survey session.
Okay, so, okay, the least techie in the group here, where am I putting this in?
So the numbers go in where you're starting a message, and the message is 2 semicolon at the top, well, at least on my phone, you would put in that number 22333.
So where it's saying search, that's what I'm putting it in?
No, on your text messaging where you would normally put the phone number or the name of the person you're texting.
Right.
Put this number in.
Okay.
And then in the message itself, write in up north in all caps. We're about the same age, so I can help her with that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. The rest of you back off, except for maybe Tony.
Well, not to
Up north, all one word?
Yes, it is.
Bob, this is Becky. I just have one more question before I can select my choice here, but
No, yeah.
with options B and C, I mean, you have other suggestions then for where to move the farmer's market if we're not having it at the Commons facility?
Yes. Yes, so we'll find a home.
This is Jen. I felt like B is not mutually exclusive, like it could go with A or C. Is that not the case?
Let me back up here, Jen. Well, what B is it's more of it's looking at the overall character of the space. We heard from some people that said, we just want a green space. We don't have a green space right downtown. And so this is like, okay, we're gonna have a sidewalk through it. It's gonna be more like a park or campus-like space versus A and C, which are a little bit, still have some plaza space where a performer might set up, or, I mean, it's not saying you wouldn't have that here, but it would be out on lawn.
And if I could follow up on that infill, what does that mean on C? I think it says infill.
Oh, those are just, yeah, those are referring to potential development sites.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I think the one in the lower right, the purple infill, is that the Viridia property that they purchased already?
Yeah.
Okay, Bob, Becky again. One other question. So with option A, what is that yellow circular area just to the west of the building?
That's like a little plaza space.
You muted yourself, Rebecca. Did you mean to?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that option.
Okay, all right.
Cursing under
You
her breath.
confused me with your
More-
silence there. It was,
Yeah.
you know.
That's where the mobile dispensary will go.
Yeah,
Right next to the mobile ice cream truck.
yeah.
Pizza.
There you go.
How large would that area be? Like what could we realistically do there?
Well, that is probably about 4,000 square feet, the way it's drawn. So,
And it would basically be like just a concrete area?
yeah, some paving of some kind, yeah.
Are you ready for us to vote?
Yeah, anytime you guys want to vote A, B, or C, and then you can see the results on your screen as people vote. So somebody already voted for A.
I had a question on B or even A with
Yeah.
the parking lot up on Washington Street. Is that, it looks like it's all one level. Is that going to be one level? Is it still going to be kind of like two levels the way it is now?
Well, that's part of an upcoming question. So we'll handle that one separately.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, you guys, go ahead and vote. Oh, well, here, I'll keep that up. Go ahead and vote.
Also, if anybody doesn't have access to a cell phone right now, you can send me your answer just in the chat and I can vote for you. Either not having access or can't figure it out. Both are fine.
Okay, once again, just put the letter in and then return.
Yep,
Like I'm sending a message, okay?
yep.
Bob, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Has there been thought amongst you all that you can combine A, B, and C and in a certain way that kind of brings to light a lot of like, for instance, B, I do love the green space of B, and I guess I'm not sure on and maybe Becky was questioning the same thing. I'm not sure on the circular concrete that's in the middle of the green space and necessarily what it would even be used for us.
Yeah.
It may serve as the same issue as the current ice rink does now. So to me, it's almost like A and B together make kind of a great impact.
Well, I will tell you that almost every time we do a design of a park or a plaza or a street, the ultimate design becomes a hybrid of ideas from different schemes.
Good.
So if you have ideas like that, feel free to talk about it like you just did, and then we'll see how, if people react positively to that. But yeah, that's certainly doable.
Cool.
Okay, so you guys having trouble voting because I'm not seeing it tally up here. It should be tallying.
I voted.
I voted.
Could you give us a option D for other?
Yeah.
No, I agree with what's already been said. I like A, and to be able to utilize that for multi-use for parking and for the vendors to come in. I think that's a great idea. I do like some of the other components of option B as well. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about the Main Street festival area too. I think that's important to know as
Yeah,
we're making the selection.
yeah. Well, Kaylee, are you seeing anything tally up on your end?
Just about the same as what's coming through here. I think it's pretty accurate to the response.
Oh, because all I have is one vote.
The
Is it 10? Looks like a 10 for A.
No, that's 100%. So that means it's
Oh,
one
I can
person
see.
voted. Either that or
Oh, there you go.
everyone voted
Everybody
for A.
voted for A.
To move my
Some of
screen.
us are voting by mail.
Did anybody vote for something? Anybody vote but yeah. That's not legal. Did anybody vote for anything other than A?
Okay, my thing says you cannot, oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, you can't vote twice.
It
I
says
think
that I
everybody
voted
must.
twice.
I think everybody must have voted for A because it's got 100% of the votes. Okay, well, let's keep moving. The second topic was humanizing Baraga Avenue. It's excessively wide by about 15 feet at least for doing what it does, which is two-way traffic and 90-degree parking. And subsequently, your sidewalks, if you see the image on the lower left, are just kind of minimal, not particularly attractive or welcoming to pedestrians, even though architecturally, you know, there's a lot going for Baraga Avenue, and it seems to have a pretty good, strong little business community going down there. So what we gathered is that if you look at the capital improvements plan, the city has intent to redo Baraga at some point. And so the question would be is, how do you as a DDA want to advocate for Baraga being rebuilt? So a couple of options. Option A is looking at Baraga and saying, okay, let's make it that idea of a festival street so that there's parking on it, but you design it specifically so that it could accommodate community festivals. Normally, you know, the type of street that you want for a festival street is not a street that you're completely dependent on to getting traffic through the community. And so from that perspective, Baraga fits. But you also want it reasonably close to the activity of downtown, which it fits a little bit, but not quite as good as maybe Maine. So a second option on B is basically just to reduce the width of the street, enhance the sidewalks, and then put in some bump outs at the ends that would have some landscape and trees, and probably make a good place to store snow in the winter. You know, those could be, those could be, you know, very nice in the summer, and they would break up the scale of the street a little bit. And you'd have a widened sidewalk that you could actually put some street trees in if you chose to do that. So it's basically the least intrusive or the least amount of change, whereas A is representing probably the most amount of change. And then option C is a little bit of a hybrid where we reduce the width of the street and we add in more islands, and maybe those islands are used for, all right, I'm getting a call, I'm gonna hang up on. Lost my pointer again. These islands could become rain gardens and stormwater infiltration beds, so you could have the street have a green sustainability focus. Any question on these three?
Bob, this is Becky. Could you just speak briefly to the various parking options that you have there with each one? It looks like option B, you're suggesting a parking deck, and option C looks to be, I mean, the existing parking lot with some modifications. And then what's your recommendation there with A, where you have kind of those pink areas?
That is the subject of a question coming up. So we'll cover that one separate. But there are different ways of looking at that Spring Street parking lot. You're right. And they're not necessarily dependent. What we want to do with BARAGA isn't necessarily dependent on what we do with the parking lot.
Bob, is there enough room on that street to put a center island green space like I'm thinking about like Mitchell Street down in Petoskey that has trees and green and grass in it in the center of the road, and then there's driving on both sides of it?
Let me think about that. It's be
Like a median? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, it's curbed and it's got greens. I mean, there's trees and grass growing in it, and it slows traffic down and it reduces the size of the overall street, and it's very aesthetically pleasing.
So Jack, something similar to on Main Street?
Yeah,
Yeah, except I
more
think
grass and trees.
Yeah, I think it's 100-foot right of way. And if you had a 15-foot drive lane on either side of the median and an 18-foot parking space, which is typical, and you could end up with about a 10-foot wide median, I guess is where I was going, which is exactly as wide as the one in Mitchell Street, because I designed that one. So I know.
It's not up here. I like that look.
Yeah, that's option D. Okay.
Jack just wants everybody to know that he's been to Petoskey.
Yeah, right. I used to live right out in Boyne City, so.
And he knows the name of the street there.
Yeah.
So he's trying to butter you up too, Bob. So
yeah.
He's going to want something later on.
That, but
Bull, you did.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, let's retool here. Kaylee, did you reset the?
Yep. 2 responses so far. The last one got 9, so that's our total.
Okay. Here, I'll go back. I'll go back so you guys aren't skewing each other's vote.
Trying to say we're not objective.
Oh no, oh no.
Tell me I can reply with A, B, C, or leave.
Don't leave. Don't leave.
I put in D, so.
Oh, okay. We have 1 vote for D. Well, actually, it's not mutually exclusive. You could do C and put a median in.
Okay, change my vote then.
All right, has everybody voted who wants to vote?
We have 8 responses now.
Okay. So it's a 50-50 shot.
I keep getting, you can't respond to this poll anymore. Declare your answers, text clear or undo.
Huh. I haven't seen that one happen.
Well, I always like to be original.
Yeah.
You could break the tie right now.
Yeah.
He's going to go for B.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
You know, I don't know if this matters to the poll process, but from the city manager point of view, you know, what do you think is the most expensive option? I mean, that's probably least, it may be preferred, but it's probably least likely to be actually happening if the expenses are out of reach, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, definitely A would be the most expensive, I would think.
Most.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, just because this is a goal in your plan doesn't mean it can't happen incrementally as
Right.
the budget.
So I agree with that. I'm just trying to give you a practical, all this, I mean, we just added the DDA into our capital improvement process this year. Becky's been through it once, so to speak. It's quite competitive with 9 other departments in the city. So I'm just saying that if the DDA takes the approach of not only one we want, but one that is actually more achievable financially, I don't know if that's should be involved in our voting decision, but I think we're more likely to get something achieved or something built if it's obviously if it's more affordable. That's all.
Yeah. Okay, so we got a 50-50 split on that one. Let's keep going. This is talking about Main Street. So it's really almost part and parcel with the discussion of BARAGA. It's really a service street more than anything else. It gets, you know, access to the parking lots that exist in the area. It is not really a shopping street or a bicycling street or heavy pedestrian street, but that is going to change in time as land development occurs. You know, you've already got one proposal at 3rd and Main. You have other people interested in the lot behind the old theater. So it's the character of Main Street is going to change over time. It's not a static thing. So a couple different ways that we could look at Main Street. Option A is just to say, okay, we're going to more or less keep it as it is, but fix it up as new development occurs. So maybe we've got, you know, the old bank parking lot becomes a development and the city lots become developed, and maybe there's more of a residential focus. And so we, you know, keep the landscape up. We add trees where we can, improve the sidewalks as development happens because they're going to tear the sidewalk out anyway, that kind of stuff. Option B says, what if we upgrade the street and make it the farmer's market? So we keep it open as a street and again, use it for parking on non-market days. But then on market days, the street gets closed from Front to 3rd. And we could actually even build in, you know, permanent stalls that would be covered parking, if you will, on non-market days and stalls for the farmers market displays. So we might have market, you know, stalls here and then jump across the street and have them here. Maybe we even take it down east of Front Street, right down to the waterfront. Although that could be kind of fun on the slope.
Be fun to watch.
Yeah. You'd have to make sure the only people who sell lopsided potatoes can be in that section. And then option C is potentially to have the market here, but really the focus is on making that your long-term festival street. And one of the advantages is it connects you right down to the waterfront, and you know, changes the character of the street. Maybe we lose some of the parking, but we keep some of it. But overall, it becomes a greener street. Any questions on these?
This is Mike again. With B and C, do they require blocking off of 3rd and Front Street during events? I mean, those are main thoroughfares.
Oh, no, I don't think you could, no.
Okay. So when you have them X'd in or colored in there, that represents what? Like on C?
That could just be the paving going across the road so that
Okay.
People on Front Street slow down as they cross it, if this becomes, a busy pedestrian path.
And does B and C allow for the development that you described in A?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It could even incentivize it.
Just a thought for the group, and I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, when we have a festival downtown, it's been Washington Street forever and ever. What kind of pushback do you think we get if we move that festival atmosphere to Main Street? I mean, do you think Washington Street businesses will like it or not like it? I mean, I don't know if that should be part of my decision, but that's one of the things I'm thinking about.
I think Blueberry Fest, they would hate it if you moved it over to Main Street.
So it's likely then that, I mean, I'm thinking more than I should, but we could probably have festivals in both areas at different times. I mean, it's not exclusive that we have
right
Main Street.
Yeah.
Great. That's how I would look at it, Mike, is, I would say Blueberry Festival would make more sense to keep it up on Washington Street because it is a more retail-based event, whereas other events could potentially happen on Main Street.
I see this as like, if you look at Main Street, especially on C, as like a golden opportunity for something like the UP 200, especially with the Commons, being right there. It opens up the parking situation probably, as opposed to Washington Street being closed all the way down to what is it, 7th, 6th, 5th, wherever they close it. And I don't know.
Well, and what we see in many communities is the majority of the festivals do not help retailers. They help restaurants because they bring people downtown, and those people will often patronize the restaurants. But for the person that's selling clothing or home goods or specialty art and that sort of thing, if you're coming down to watch a run, for instance, or sled dog race, you're not down there to shop. And so for them, it actually, for those sort of traditional retailers, they prefer to not have events on the main shopping street. So it is a bit of a mixed bag. And as Becky said, it could be that you tailor the location of the event based on who it will help. Because I think events are going to help restaurants no matter what. If people have to walk a block away to go to a restaurant, it's not going to make or break whether they go to a restaurant or not.
I really like the idea of Main Street being bookended by the Commons on the west end and then the Lakeshore over on the other end. I think that just provides a nice aesthetic. I guess one question that I have is if we were to choose option C, or even if I were to vote for option C, let's say, to have Main Street as more the festival street, that might change my vote if I voted earlier to have Baraga as the festival street. So just to throw that out.
Yeah.
Change.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be a festival street.
It would, and we may want to go back and revisit Baraga if there were support to do it here. Support for a festival type street here.
I think having the additional option of Main Street as a festival area is a good thing. Like I said, I think that there are certain things that you just can't move off of Washington, Ladies Night, and the things that are there specifically to help those vendors. But I think Main Street is a great second option.
I think it's a premier location for any type of, if you're going to have a street that you're going to dignify as a festival street. I mean, there's no retail there currently. Not saying that that's not going to change, but I mean, I think that what it does is it bridges the gap between Baraga and Washington just beautifully. So if there is a festival going on, people are going to frequent those businesses, especially the restaurants, more.
And once again, that Bob, that's probably the most expensive option, right?
Oh, yeah. But I do think you have to think about, okay, my experience has been, decide what you want as a community and then seek the funding based on what the community wants and needs. And not to say that the money will always follow, but I think you have to aim for what you think best fits the community, and then pursue it.
I think it would be a real coup for the residents that live in the district to have that just spruced up, if nothing else.
But my experience is if it's an unattainable goal, nothing changes.
Right. There's that too.
It stays crummy, and so I mean, I voted for C because I think it's obviously the best, or at least to me, obviously the best option. But I think by voting for C, it might be unreachable financially, and it isn't going to change. So I hope that's not the case. But
well, I would also add that well-designed streets that achieve your goals don't always have to be super expensive. In other words, just spending money, throwing money at a project doesn't make it work better or oftentimes look better. You just have to think about what you prioritize as your what you want out of it. In other words, like we redid downtown Main Street in Midland, and Midland had the resources financially because of their connection to the foundations locally, but they opted to just do kind of plain concrete that was done in a nice pattern with exposed aggregate in some panels and regular concrete in others, and it's super attractive, but it's not, $30 a square foot granite or brick,
is it still there?
Yeah.
But didn't get flooded out or anything?
No, it was, we were watching it very carefully. It was flood adjacent, let's say. Anyway, we want to start voting on this. So I'm taking you guys way past your meeting time. How much time do you, I know you try to end at 9 and.
Yep.
So we have
Never
9.
ended at 9.
What's that?
We've never ended at 9.
Okay. Well, let's keep moving though. I
Lately,
We do have 9 responses on that one, so I
Oh,
think
you
we
do?
have.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just looking at the slide coming up and it didn't have responses shown. Okay. Next one, connections to and improving 3rd Street. 3rd Street's a mix of small town, urban and suburban development styles. But recent improvements and I think new developments have been very positive. And there's a lot of discussion about the fact that as you look up the hill from Washington Street, you don't know what's there. And a lot of that's because from a land use perspective, you've got a gap in the commercial corridor. The lights kind of march up the hill and there's an occasional banner, but it doesn't necessarily draw you up as a pedestrian. There's actually some very nice retail just north of Washington on 3rd. I think some of your coolest shops are right there. But it's not necessarily connected. And then when you get into the corridor itself, the sidewalks are very narrow and they don't have any landscape element to them. So this one is not a voting option. It's just something that we drew up to show you what's possible. So this is kind of a prototypical block. Not a specific one, but your blocks are about 300 feet long. So downtown in this case would be to our left and campus to our right. You've got 2 lanes of traffic. Oops, that label's in the wrong spot. And you got a bike lane and then you have a parking lane. So there's a bike lane going south, but bicyclists going north are riding with the traffic. And of course they have the advantage of going down so they can travel at a faster speed. I think that was a logical choice. But what we have found is that if you can do things like adding bump outs at the corner to get trees, that'll give you some mass over time, and potentially even trees and grates. Even though your walks are very narrow, I'm going to show you an example of one we did recently where you can get trees on a pretty narrow street.
Did you say trees, Jim? Jim, did you hear that? Did you hear that, Jim?
Those look pretty.
I thought I heard you chuckling over there.
So
see, I told you all these years.
Trees.
It's only been like 10 years in the making.
That's right.
So this is a project we just completed in Ann Arbor. I think a construction was completed last fall or last spring. I don't remember now. Things go by. This sidewalk that you're looking at in the photo is about 10 feet wide. So that's roughly the width of what you have on 3rd Street. In some cases you're a little narrower, but it's in that realm. And so in this case, we used a long tree grate. It's 3 foot wide by 10 feet long. So you still get good aeration and water coming into it, giving the tree a little chance to breathe. Picked an upright species. These are elms. And it sort of fits that funky character. So things are possible is where the message we wanted to leave you with. Funding those things, I think, is something that needs to be considered. And we're advocating that you include the 3rd Street into the TIF district, so that you can generate the revenue necessary to do some improvements.
Bob, question, Tony here. What's the distance across from bump out to bump out?
In this case, I'd have to measure it. I don't know if I can here, but this is the exact same situation you have on 3rd. You got parking, 2 traffic lanes, a bike lane, and then parking. And so you've got, I think from bump out to bump out, you'd have 25 and a half.
Thanks.
Just as an additional note for those of us that have been around forever and ever, we did something like this on Washington Street years ago and then took it all out later on. I don't know if that's just a trendy kind of thing or maybe Bob, you have some history in that regard as to why they were fashionable for a while and then they're not. Or is it fashion? Is it practicality?
I think you have to really think about doing it in the northern environment because of the snow plowing. Because there's no question your snowplow drivers would prefer that they can come right through that parking lane and blow right through the intersection and keep going. It's faster, it's neater for the snowplow driver. And I think those things have to be considered seriously. When we redid downtown Petoskey, in the early 90s, we actually sat down with the DPW director and said, how are we going to make this happen? How can we design these so that the snowplows can get around them and not curse? Frankly, I expected to find myself hung in effigy in Petoskey, but because from the snowplow drivers, but we went through and did the due diligence and met with people and were selective about where they went and very careful about how they were laid out. But you have to have buy-in from the Department of Public Works, or you just setting yourself up for failure.
To that point, do you believe that was the reason the bump outs were taken out? I think it was because of the challenges of snow removal.
Okay.
I had a question about I see you moved the bike lane to the east side of the street. Was there a reason for that?
Well, I didn't mean to. If I got that backwards, it's just the label didn't get moved. I flip-flopped the drawing and I didn't move the label. So the bike lane is up here. You see the little bicyclist.
All right.
Yeah. Or you could just have campus at the other direction.
Yeah, exactly.
With those bump outs, I guess what I have to say about that is when you're turning right and going north, it's really hard to stay in your lane and not go into the other lane of traffic coming south because of that bike lane over on the west side of the street. And if you had those bump outs there, you'd really be going over into that other lane quite a bit when you're going to turn. It's just tough, especially in the winter.
Yeah. Well, and that's why you have to be very careful about like the radius you put on the corner. Not to demean my own profession, but most landscape architects would draw this at like a 15-foot radius, nice tight corner, which only a geoprism or whatever, some small car could make. And you want to make it big enough so that trucks can get around. So you have to think that through. And the other aspect is, downstate here, we might use 10 or 10.5 foot traffic lane, but that isn't wide enough for the amount of snow you guys get, because you will have one effective lane. So you need a good 12-foot lane so that as snow piles up, you've got room. So those are challenges that you just have to think through. And we're not advocating bump outs or not. There's a couple of advantages to them, but there are some challenges with them. But I think what we wanted to do is just get the conversation started on what you could do to improve Third. Okay, well, let's keep going because we got a few more things to do and you guys have places to go. So connecting downtown to the waterfront. So a couple of things that we noticed, obviously over the last 25 years, the relationship of downtown and the community to the waterfront has changed, and Marquette has been an absolute leader in the Midwest and on the Great Lakes for, you know, getting access to the water and getting bike trails in and that sort of thing. But there are still some things that could be done to improve where you're at currently. And some of those things that we see are, you know, on the west side of the street, you got pretty poor pedestrian access. You got the nice path on the east side of the street, but then, you know, how do you connect people and entice them into downtown or vice versa? And then, you know, in terms of getting to the ORDOC, which is a big appeal for many people, you've got to walk through a parking lot. So you, as you view it from the boulevard, you look down, you're like, oh, well, how do I get there? So a couple of things that we're looking at is, you know, protecting and reinforce the Iron Ore Heritage Trail and the City Trail, of course, those are super valuable. Connecting Lakeshore Boulevard to the ORDOC, I think would be a good goal. Improving the pedestrian experience on the west side of Lakeshore, and then connecting Matson Park to the downtown, perhaps by creating some sort of activity that happens here. And this might be just our sense of it, but the Firemen's Memorial is a very helpful beacon to pull people down to the water. You don't see too many people going from there and continuing into the park, and that's just a huge asset to have. And then lastly, creating more active street front development, whether it's, you know, on these vacant parking lots or otherwise. So A, B, and C are on separate sheets on this one because of the configuration of the plans, but on A, a fairly modest change, taking a little bit of the parking out and creating a path that links down from Spring Street down to the ORDOC, maybe creating a nice little spot here that says you've arrived, whether that's, you know, through paving or landscaping or banners. And then here at Matson Park, to create some nice little terraces that might become part of performance space or just a place to look out over the park and the water. So that is A. And then B does a similar thing. It splits the parking. It says, okay, we'll have a little parking lot right off of Spring Street with a turnaround. And then where this park, I forget the name of the pocket park, where that pocket park connects into downtown, well, which is traditionally, I think, where the rail went through to the ORDOC. Then we'll connect a path through here that recalls the rail condition. Maybe we make a nice little roundabout at the end of Main Street and put a sculpture or a statue or fountain of some kind. And then up at Matson, maybe we create a Native American gathering place, which is something we heard from several of the stakeholders, that there was an interest in the community of having a place that honored Native Americans. And then option C is, you know, taking a broader swipe at connecting to the ORDOC here. Maybe we end up with a bathroom facility or some kind, or a little community shelter. And then this one fits, of course, into that combination of Main Street being a festival street. And then maybe along the promenade, we think about things as it's maybe it's sail sculptures, maybe it's children's play that's themed along the water to balance with the play area that's further east in Matson, but some kind of way of enticing people down onto that promenade. Okay, any questions?
I don't have any questions, but maybe I do have a question. When you Can you show me A one more time?
Yep.
Please.
I could. Mouse was behaving. There it is.
I just, when you made these approaches to the ORDOC, especially, I mean, is that taking into account what is actually city-owned property? We do have some relationships with the boating community in that area, that parking lot, and some of those other lots that could make that type of transition problematic. But I'm just wondering exactly, like in proposal A, the green space that leads up to the ORDOC, is that based solely on what you know as city property?
We're going to have to look into that because we made the assumption that if it was public parking, it was probably city owned.
Well, that's a safe assumption, and it is city owned, but there are some contractual issues there that
Yes.
that might make it difficult to. It's like anything else. You want to improve something, someone's going to have an issue with
Yeah.
it. So,
Well, Becky has talked about the agreement that was made when the property was deeded over and what restrictions are tied to that. And we can look into that in more detail.
okay, I was just curious. That's all.
Yep.
Okay. You can go back to B and C if you want.
Okay. All right, so are we ready to vote, Kaylee?
Yep, we have 3 responses right now, so
Okay.
continue sending them in.
Oh boy.
If there are specific elements of the 3 options that you like, we could happy to discuss that too. Because again, we can mix and match.
And all of Lakeshore that's shown on this is in the TIF. They do part of their taxes are for the TIF, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. I know they are down in the townhomes and all of
Yeah.
those places.
Can you move back to A for a moment as well?
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, just as an aside, the fish place and some of these other uses down here, do they encourage retail? I mean, do they have customers that come into that area or not?
They do have customers, but I don't think they, as a general area, I don't know that that voting community and others can chime in. I don't know that they're all that receptive to infringements on their lifestyle. How's that?
It seems like there's a really big disconnect between that part of the community and the yacht club and the rest of the public.
Okay.
I think you see a lot of frustration, especially like during 4th of July, when people are trying to get to the Lower Harbor for the 4th of July festival. You know, just last year they put a big fence up because there used to be like a cut through, kind of forcing people to get off their property and walk around, kind of thing. So I think that that's definitely something to, you know, keep in mind. Is there probably be some hesitation from them?
Yeah, and we sort of left that untouched. You know, we didn't really, you know, encourage or discourage people into this area. But I think it's kind of cool looking, the old Quonset huts and it you know, it looks pretty interesting. It's intriguing, but if they don't want people in there, then, you know, you don't really necessarily want to encourage that.
I wonder why. You know, I mean, did something happen? I mean, why are they Yeah.
I don't know. And I feel like Phil's Fish House, I think they have a really good regular customer base, but I
Yeah.
don't know if it's a destination for tourists or people that don't already know about it. There's not
Right.
much draw, like there's not advertising or anything to draw them down there to go check it out.
And which is interesting because like Carlson's Fish Market at Fishtown in Leelanau, that's one of the biggest attractions in the state of Michigan is Fishtown.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of experience with the boating community. There's a lot of them don't even, a lot of the boat users don't live in the city, which is part of the problem. I think they don't have the same ownership or expectations beyond what they can get out of boating, and they just have a whole different idea of what their relationship is with the community, how the community should treat them. If you ask most of them, they think they're the heart of our community, which is mind-boggling to me. Seeing how the lake is frozen, 6 months of the year, but it's a different dynamic, and it's often hard to deal with. And I think a lot of it is just there's just a lot of disconnect and lack of ownership for the community in general, I think.
Yeah. And looking towards the future too, I know there's a lot of, I'm not sure of the group's name, but there is some people that want to redo the ORDOC, looking into making it like a green space, event space, that kind of stuff. So if that were to go through successfully, then that could very well connect the downtown with that path that we're kind of looking at on all of these options. If the ORDOC ever is redone to make it public friendly.
Well, that's the Botico group. It's BOT capital ECO. They have a website. They're actually making decent strides, but that's one reason why I know we could have issues with the dock association, because they're also giving us, I don't want to say grief, but they're making it, they're not making it difficult yet, but they're making it very clear that if we do anything or Botico does anything, that it's going to need their approval or their involvement.
Oh, you're talking about the sailboat, that section of the boaters. Okay.
The fish docks, the dock association. There's an association there where Phil is, and they well, their point of contact is just, it's difficult.
Right.
So,
All right.
Can I
go back to B and C, please?
Yes.
Can I just ask a question first? See what everybody thought. There are some people who don't think the ORDOC is as attractive as other people think. And to one of the options would be maybe to, I don't even know if it'd be possible, but to take the top part of the ORDOC off, which would open up the whole harbor where you could see everything and would make it much more attractive, and use the bottom part of the dock as kind of a walkway going out there, and kind of develop that instead of trying to develop that, what they're trying to do, which I don't think is going to be realistic, or they'll be able to come up with the money for that. But I just kind of wanted to see what everybody else thought about that.
I think you'll get a lot of pushback if you try to take off the top of the ORDOC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would, but at the same time, if you didn't have it there, I just think the harbor would look a lot more beautiful, being able to see the whole thing all at once. But I know what a lot of people like it. So
well, it's one of those areas that it's an asset to the community, but it's also a huge deficit.
Yeah.
Because it's a money pit. And the only thing going right now to do anything with it, because it's certainly not a priority for the city, is the Botico group. You know, I would think that, Jim, if there are people interested in what you're describing, it might be worth them to get involved with Botico, because I don't know that Botico's design and plan is anywhere cast in stone. And I don't think it's, I think they're willing to listen to most discussions. But you know, the truth is that if Botico doesn't do something with it, the city isn't going to. I mean, it's just not a priority financially for us. So it's going to either stay the same or whatever beat Botico does, I think.
Yeah, we did some planning and design for a ORDOC in Minnesota, and I'll send those to Becky. But it's the same kind of thing where it's a cool idea, but it's very hard to find funding. Now, if you could think about it in terms of offering fishing access, there's funding to pay for those sorts of things. There's funding for farmers markets, and there's funding for street improvements, which we've talked about, but kind of a one-off, we're going to improve this iron ore dock really is more of a, you're really probably dependent on a philanthropic community or a foundation. I don't know, Rob, maybe you have some ideas.
I was just going, it just reminds me of the peer discussion here in Traverse City, which you're very familiar with.
Yeah.
And, you know, here it was more a case of building a new pier, and it was going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 million, and the city commission eventually said that's too much. And it seems like the same might be true here. This Botico group, I mean, have they approached the city for funding? Because it seems like if they, you know, they probably would, you know, need to get some sort of, not just city approval on what they're doing, but also maybe ask for money. And then that kind of draws the city into the decision. And then, you know, then it becomes, okay, what does the city want to do with it? You know, do we really want to spend money on renovating the ORDOC as it is, or is there some other maybe different plan that it maybe costs less, but it still keeps part of it? So I think one way or another, the city, it feels like the city would be drawn into the decision-making process.
I think they're waiting for me to retire before they ask for money, because they came to me 4 or 5 years ago, and I made it very clear to them that they wanted to pursue this. I made it very clear to them that I did not have the money or staff to contribute to this process. Mm-hmm. We've been sucked in a little bit staff-wise because there were some technical things that needed to be taken care of. For example, we needed to redo the bottom line agreement with the state. We needed to, we had this item in front of the city commission for support as far as the commission supports it in concept. And but I've resisted, and you know how things just kind of go naturally. Mm-hmm. You know, well, maybe Mike forgot that he said it was going to be no money, and you know, every once in a while I'll take a run at, well, can you help us with these funds, or can you apply for that grant? And I've stood fast that if you want to fundraise, you fundraise as a group, and that's the general understanding, because it's just we have a lot of other priorities for our city money, and I've made it very clear to them that we're not going to finance anything. That could change over time, but I think is their best option for that changing is to me to either retire or die. So I'm not sure which one they prefer. But
and something of that magnitude is going to be, yeah. That's a big project.
I mean, we're talking millions of dollars here.
Yeah.
And they've assured me, I mean, they haven't been active for a while, but they've got a pretty focused group that really wants to accomplish this. And one of the hurdles we actually have right now is that in order to apply for grants, they probably need something like the full faith and credit of the city finances to do that. And I haven't reached that level of comfort yet that I don't want to co-sign on something that's going to put us in a hole for millions of dollars, at least not yet.
Well, and it's not always just the money to improve it too. I know, and Rob used the example of a potential fishing pier in Traverse City, which there were granting agencies. The Fisheries Trust, Great Lakes Fisheries Trust, was willing to pay for the dock, but it was the maintenance. So now you've got, you know, a new $200,000 a year annual maintenance that has to come out of your recreation department for this. So it has to be thought through.
Well, that's interesting because most of the public doesn't understand that part. I mean, we're getting a new park. We get a new park. Clark Park was a great new park for the city of Marquette, but the legacy costs are something that people just don't understand.
Yeah.
It should be easy. All you gotta do is sweep the floor, you know. All you gotta do is cut the grass. You know?
Right,
That was $200,000.
I'm sorry. I thought this was a counseling session there for a second.
Yeah. Did everybody vote?
I think it's great to make it pretty, you know, walking up to it, but I think there's also a strong contingent here in town that would say it's historic and leave it the way it is.
Yeah.
There's that too.
I don't personally, if my sense is a blend of, is probably closer to that. Like it'd be very difficult and expensive to provide access to it. But it is an important element. It's an iconic part of the landscape of the Great Lakes, you know. All right, so we voted on that. Got a little bit a mix across the board on that, but okay. So I think what we ought to do, we've got a couple transportation related things. But my thinking is at this point, it's 9:30. We should carry these over to the next meeting. What do you think, Becky?
I think that's a good idea, Bob, just to be respectful of everybody's time.
Yeah, and we've covered a lot. Everybody's head's kind of swimming as it is. Do we want to revisit the vote on Baraga?
I don't.
Okay.
No, I think you could let it stand.
Sorry. You asked.
Let that stand.
Mike's like, I'm out of coffee.
Yeah, really. Plus I gotta pee.
Yeah, I know. All right, well, we'll tabulate those things, put them into a quick email to Becky. And then if you're willing and able, let's be on your agenda for the July meeting. And we'll cover the transportation and policy aspects of things.
Yes, we can do that, Bob.
Okay.
Thank you for your time, Bob.
Yeah, thank you. It was a very engaging conversation, and we learned a lot. And I think it's coming together.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
I'm gonna be in the region in about 10 days to go to my wife's family camp, but I promised Becky I wouldn't come and see her. I don't want to have any Southeast Michigan germ visiting you.
Right.
Although I might have to go by, put my face mask on and go by, pick up a couple growlers at Iron Ore Dock.
Bob, you're welcome to come see us anytime.
Okay.
Rebecca,
Yes.
this is Tony. I have to step off. I've got another meeting that's taking place, so I want to thank the folks that are here, and I'll let Vice President, I think it's Frost, take over if that's okay.
Yes, that's
I think
fine.
it's Jeremy,
It should be Jeremy
the
though.
vice chair.
I'm
Yep.
sorry. I apologize.
Thanks.
See you guys.
See you later, Tony.
Bye,
See you
Tony.
later,
Thank
Tony.
you.
Thanks.
All right, Becky, well, I think we'll sign off as well.
Okay.
So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay.
Thanks all.
Everyone.
Guys.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you guys for letting me join today as well. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks for being
Jen,
here, Jen.
Anytime, Jen.
Thanks. Hey, Becky, did you tell them the other news?
Yes, are we able to do that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, well, do you want me to do that while you're here?
Nope, I'm
Are you
gonna
s-
hop off and talk to you guys soon. Thank you
Okay.
so much, and everybody stay sane and safe.
All right,
Thanks,
bye-bye.
Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay. All
Wow,
right,
there goes
so I
half
guess
the group.
that was some good conversation. Thank you guys. Appreciate your feedback and your input. So I guess Jeremy, you're the lead of the meeting now.
Yeah, Becky, I know what you're going to talk about with her, but do you want to wait until we have comments at the end or your director's report to discuss?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in the director's report, so we can just continue on with item
Okay,
6.
so we're on item 6, new business, COVID-19 reopening efforts.
Okay, so I've got a presentation for you all. No,
Oh.
I'm kidding. I did send you one though via email. It was a presentation on our DDA support of the businesses and their COVID reopening and recovery. So hopefully you all had a chance to look at that. I'm not going to go over it right now just for the interest of time. I guess I would just open it up if you guys had any questions about that at this time.
I just have one question as far as restaurants are reopening and the guidelines that the state has set out. What are our efforts, if any, to make sure that they're following the rules and doing the right thing? Because I feel like it's just kind of on a trust basis right now, but just seeing a lot of businesses reopening, there isn't 6 feet between tables. Some people aren't wearing masks. And, I know that you can put the information out there and all the emails and it's on everyone else to read them, but is there any kind of like enforcement or kind of checkups, or how do we deal with that kind of stuff?
That's a good question. We don't have anything in place right now. I don't know if it would be our place to do that, or
I can
know
help
it would
with
be
that
necessarily
answer.
a police,
I can help with that
enforcement, but yeah, Mike, go for it.
And I didn't know if the DDA should put out, like, as more businesses reopen, like, please make sure, like, a reminder email about all the guidelines that we're supposed to be following, or, just curious.
Well, the way it works, and it's not a clean method, is that if someone is observed violating any part of the orders for the governor, it usually takes a complaint from the health department to the prosecutor's office to do anything. The prosecutor's office then notifies the local police department. We will then look into it and provide information back to the prosecutor's office.
Okay.
The only instruction I give our police department is that I don't want to see them on the 6 o'clock news wrestling with an old lady who's not wearing a mask or whatever. So, and that's been the rub. That's been the problem, is that, these are civil orders, and police departments generally enforce misdemeanors or felony infractions. So it's hard. It's hard to do that and not upset people and not cause more problems than if you just left it alone.
Yeah. I think the biggest infractions we've seen so far is just not the tables not being the 6 feet apart, and then also more people in a business than it should be. And I've heard that from multiple different restaurants too. And so that's why, and I know the health department said, if you want to file a formal complaint, the police will take your name, but then you kind of get into some gray area if you really want it on the record that bad. So I just don't want, I feel like most of our businesses will do the right thing, but they're also trying to get away with the least amount that they have to do as well, trying to get back on their feet. And so I just don't want us to be in a position where we're looking at this all again in September, just because we tried to squeeze a few more people in,
Yeah, no, what you're saying is that people are being somewhat irresponsible. I can't believe that. Jeez. Yeah. It's hard to separate the kids from the adults in a lot of this. But anyway.
I guess kind of what it leads to is, and I've seen the same thing, Nicole, and, I'm trying to do everything the right way in our restaurant.
So are we, yeah.
I'm going past other restaurants and I'm seeing people, packed in there and sitting right next to each other. And it's like, well, then why should I follow the rules if nobody else is going to follow the rules?
Right.
And, I think eventually all the restaurants are going to be doing that if there isn't any kind of enforcement. And I'm not trying to rat on any of the restaurants or anything, but I'm just asking Mike, what do you think about this?
I think it all sucks. It's just, it's a difficult situation. You're absolutely right. But it's a matter of, you may have to rat out the other restaurant. We do not go and look. We do not search these out. We respond solely on complaints. What we generally do as a first step is we have a pre-written letter that's very pointed and very specific that we deliver, kind of like a trespass warning kind of thing, if you've seen those, and said you are reported to be in violation. If you continue to be in violation, you will trigger you could trigger a police response or a complaint. So we give them the option or the opportunity to stop what they're doing or change. So we don't tell them who called. And the health department, if you call the health department, they don't tell us who called. We really don't care who called, at least in these scenarios. So I would suggest that if you see that, and not just because you want to try to, I know how you are, Jim, you want to try to slam one of your competitors, you can't keep calling on the billet, damn it, But I mean, we'll look into it as best we can, and the other thing that's hanging out there is that if you call us on a Wednesday, the order which might change on a Thursday or a Friday, and those are all the things we're trying to deal with. So my advice is that if you suspect something like that, or you witness something like that, either give the police department a call, and they'll probably tell you to call the health department. I would recommend calling the health department to start the process, and then they will go from there.
Well, I guess instead of that, my question would be, you have a lot of officers that stop in a lot of establishments with liquor licenses just to check on that, and that's in the police log, like, almost daily they're doing that. Why couldn't, as long as they're doing that, why can't they look into that as well?
I think they could. I don't know how they haven't been doing those liquor inspections for some time now, but I certainly think it's something they could do. I'm sure it's something they would not be comfortable doing because it becomes an objective or a subjective thing on their part for something they're not really familiar with or comfortable with. But it's probably something that going forward could be done.
Well, and along with this, I just talked to the Michigan Restaurant Association yesterday and asked them how long they think we will be at this 50% capacity. And they said that the governor told them that it was going to be till at least there was a vaccine developed for this.
Really?
And that might not, and that might not even happen then. So we might be at 50% for years here. So I think this really needs to be addressed, because if other people aren't going to follow the rules, I don't think Nicole and I are going to follow the rules either, because it's kind of going to be like sink or swim here.
Well, and the other thing too is that, like we always want to do things the right way, above and beyond, and you're putting the safety of your guests and the safety of your employees. But what's going to happen is that you and I are the only ones doing it the right way and everyone isn't. We're going to have the unruly guests come in, because why are we making them wear masks when they don't have to wear them anywhere else? Why are we not letting them wait inside when they can wait inside everywhere else? Why don't we have more tables to service them when everyone else is packing them in? And so, like, obviously we want to do the right thing, but we also don't want to get hit with, the jerks and stuff like that, because they're so used to not having to follow the rules at other places that when they come to our places and they have to follow the rules, now you're kind of the outcast, and that creates a whole nother problem itself.
I've had the same issues with people asking why we're following the rules when, a lot of other places aren't. And say, oh, I guess I'm just worried more about it. And a lot
I
of
have no idea. I have no idea who these other people are. And the police department doesn't know either. And certainly the health department doesn't know. I mean, if you're going to leave it up to liquor inspection, it's probably never going to be fixed. And I know you don't like to do it, but I think if there is a reason for you guys to believe it, let us check it out. I mean, tell us. We'll do the best we can. And again, if it goes until a vaccine or later, I mean, it may become the new norm. Maybe the police department is going to have to rethink how they do things. It's just that it's, it's police departments these days are getting a bad enough reputation as it is, and having to go into restaurants and move people apart or violate. It's more likely they'll violate the owner or the operator as opposed to actually separating, the tables. Yeah. We have a process in place, and like I said, if there's a complaint, we receive a complaint, we'll deliver the letter. Okay. And then we'll follow up on it afterwards to make sure there's compliance. That's the best we can do for right now.
All right.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, Becky, is that all we have for your part on that new business?
Yes, we can move on unless anybody else has any comments on that.
I don't have the agenda in front of me, Becky, but was there a moment we were going to discuss the outdoor seating? Is that on the agenda too?
This might be a good time to talk about that. I guess just to provide an update to the board. We have worked with the city to waive fees for outdoor merchandise displays and also sidewalk cafes on public property. And as part of that as well, waiving the fees and the procedures to expand outdoor dining and what is it called? Beverage and anyway, outdoor dining on private property. So for those restaurants that have private parking lots, then they're able to put additional seating out there. So thank you again to Mike and to the city and to the mayor and the city commission, everybody, for putting those measures in place to allow for adaptations to those limited capacity restrictions that are in place. We've had probably about 5 restaurants who have indicated their intention to put outdoor seating. I think I've seen one of them that's actually done it so far. So we're continuing to monitor, if people are taking advantage of that opportunity and how that addresses the needs that are out there. Just seeing if those measures are adequate, or then potentially if they aren't, opening up the conversation about closing the street. But for now, I think considering that there aren't a whole lot of restaurants who are taking advantage of the measures that we have put in place, that we'll just continue to monitor the situation.
Yeah, I think that's best. And the point I wanted the DDA board to hear was that, both Becky and I have been dealing with this closing of the street issue for a while. It's died down now. I think it's gone, but there were a lot of good reasons why we were against doing that. And that's maybe not appropriate for this discussion, but one thing I wanted to express to the DDA And I've talked to Becky about this previously, is that if this continues, if there is continued pressure to close a street, it might be more appropriate that as a DDA, we look at making like the commons area available for restaurants to set up, or parking lots, or other areas within the DDA that are public property, as opposed to closing off a main thoroughfare. And they're not talking about a afternoon festival. I mean, these people are talking about months of being closed, and which is one of the reasons why I opposed it. And so, I mean, I just wanted the DDA to at least think about supporting us if we are continue to be pressured into finding public space available for some of these outdoor services. That's all.
I think it doesn't look even-handed if you close a street down, because it becomes unfair for other people in the downtown district. And
yeah, it's unfair to other businesses, and it's unfair to like 3rd Street. I mean, it's unfair to Baraga. It's unfair to all these other places. And,
the 3rd, yeah.
You know, there was a lot of pressure on Becky from a couple of businesses. And the funniest part for me was that they were going to police it. There wasn't going to be large crowds. And when you guys were talking about the distancing before, they were going to police the distancing. They were going to police the capacity, and we didn't even have to be involved. It was all going to be a smooth operation. And I said, what world do you live in? I mean, you know, so, but anyway, that's getting away. I just want you to understand that as a city and as a DDA, I think if the conversation needs to be continued, that we continue down the path of public space availability other than streets. That's all.
I agreed last month, and I agree now. I don't think it should be done.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you a quick question, Mike, about if you do set up tables on in our own parking lots, can you just put the tables out there? Are there any requirements right now that we have to meet?
I don't think so. Becky can probably answer that better, but I think other than what they want you to do with distancing, you know, we're not, you don't even have to apply for a permit. I mean, you don't have to do anything except all I've asked Becky to do is just keep a record of who's doing it, so that, you know, we have some idea of how much it's happening and that kind of thing. But no, you can do whatever, as far as I'm concerned. You can even go on Don Poffin's chunk, put a table if you want. As a matter of fact, I'd start there if I was you.
What are you going to tell him when he calls you?
I'm going to say you have the wrong number.
That's correct, though, Jim. You wouldn't have to do anything else. That's part of these measures that we put in place, is you don't have to go through the entire site plan approval, you know, planning commission, all of that. That's something that would have had to happen under normal circumstances. So that's part of what's been waived right now as part of this COVID response. So you can just put your tables out there. However, I do ask, we have a form on our website for those that are anticipating doing that, just so we can keep track of that. If you could just go on the website and fill out that form, it just asks a few simple questions, you know, how many tables are you planning to put out, for how long, and that type of thing.
Okay.
Becky, if you serve alcohol in a parking lot, does there need to be some sort of fenced in area?
Actually, if you do plan on serving alcohol, there's a form that you would have to fill out through the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, and they've kind of put an expedited process in place to get the approval to do so. So that would be, I guess, if you were planning on doing that, that would be the other component.
I think that's changed now, Beck. I just got a email from the Michigan Restaurant Association that the Liquor Commission is allowing cocktails to be taken to go, and to allow social drinking in the parking lots without any special, on private property, without any special forms or permits. So I think you can do the same thing right now, is just go out there and start serving.
Okay, I'll have to do some research on that.
I saw that announcement yesterday too, Jim. I think it was, I saw that out there.
Yeah, it was just yesterday that she came out with that. With the
John,
weather.
that makes me nervous that you get those kind of announcements.
I'll forward it to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sean's on the mailing list.
It would be possible to get a few more picnic tables put in place at the commons. For right now, I think there's only 2, and since all that area is not being used for the farmers market and stuff, I've just heard a lot of people say they wish there was more picnic tables out in the areas so that they could take their to-go food and enjoy it outside when it's so nice out without having to bring it home.
Yes, we're looking at purchasing some more. The picnic tables that we had are in a pretty bad state of disrepair, so we do have to purchase some additional picnic tables that we can put out there.
Cool.
I can also check to see if we have some, they might have seagull poop on them, but
That can be cleaned.
let me ask our staff if we have any that we could put down there temporarily. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
We did get the side note. We did get the pigeon situation cleaned up in the lower ramp, so it's possible.
there you go.
Just don't ask Belconi.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Moving on to the committee reports. Our parking committee looks like we have
Okay.
a report for.
Yes, I will keep this very brief. Our parking committee did meet yesterday. We are looking at getting the parking meters and pay stations back online as of Monday, June 15th. They have been shut down since middle of March, when the shutdown happened. Also, as part of that, we will be invoicing for our rental parking permits. Those are the 2 pieces that we've provided complimentary for the last 3 months. However, that does have an impact on our revenues to the tune of about $68,000 right now, which is a 33% loss as compared to this time period last year. So it is rather imperative that we get those revenue streams back up and running and try to recoup some of those costs. I think in the meantime, we're going to have to look at some of our parking strategies and unfortunately put them off for the time being, namely being the replacement of the parking meters that we had planned for this year. Hopefully being able to nurse the meters through one more winter. So
Excuse me,
I mean,
Becky.
yes.
I have to have another meeting at 10, so I have to excuse
Sure.
myself. So I apologize. And
No problem.
if I miss anything, let me know. Jim, if you want to volunteer me for anything, go right ahead. I know you'll try. So
That's a risky thing to say.
I have to exit too, so I have a
doesn't mean I'm
meeting
going to
at
do
10.
it. But thanks, folks. Sorry.
So
Thank
thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Bye, guys.
Okay, so that's it for parking. In the interest of time, I'll just jump right into the director's report. The thing that Jen had mentioned earlier when she was on with us was the Match on Main COVID-19 Response Program grant that we had applied for through the MEDC. We did get word yesterday that we have been approved for the $50,000 that we had applied for. So we'll be making those announcements shortly as far as the businesses that will be receiving those funds. We did receive 29 applications. We had a review committee, which consisted of Jeremy and myself, and then Tara and Sarah Tremblay here from our office. So we reviewed those applications based on the MEDC's criteria, as well as some local criteria that we had identified as well, and then narrowed it down to 15 businesses that we included in our overall grant application. So those will be the 15 that will be re-granted these funds. It's going to be a quick process. It's my understanding that we'll be able to get those funds in our account very shortly. And then once we get them, we can disperse them accordingly. So it's all happening very quickly. The application process itself was very quick. They announced the program and we had about a 2-week time frame to get the applications in. So I was very proud of the team. We worked together to make it happen expeditiously, and was very proud and pleased to announce that we did receive that funding, which will help our businesses. So very happy about that. If you guys have any questions about it.
Exciting. It's very awesome.
Thank you. And thanks, Jeremy, for sitting on that review committee as well. We appreciate your time and your input.
Can you guys hear my clock in the background?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
The third time.
Okay.
Going off every hour.
Okay, and then really the only other thing I wanted to mention was a farmer's market update. As you guys know, we did start this market season with an online market. We've been having some success with that. It's very popular from the vendor and the customer perspective. We have about 100 and I would say about 175 orders on average per week. It's been a little bit more difficult administratively from both the accountancy perspective and also staffing and having to find volunteers to fill the orders and to make it all work for the pickup on Saturday morning. So while it has been positive, it has also been challenging in some regards with the governor's latest orders, opening things up a little bit more, especially for outdoor events and activities. We are looking at this point to transition to the physical market. It will be with limited capacity. We don't have to limit the number of customers in the market necessarily, but we are still required to have appropriate distancing of our vendor booth spaces. So we'll be able to accommodate far fewer than our typical number of vendors. Probably about 33 is what we figured in order to be in compliance with those restrictions. And so we have about 33 vendors who have been participating regularly in that online marketplace. And so what the plan is we'll open it up to those vendors first because they're the ones who are essential vendors who are selling the foods and the other like personal products and things that are deemed essential. So we're planning on right now for this week and then the week of the 20th still being the online marketplace and then shutting down for the week of the 27th just to enable us to make that transition and put all of the appropriate social distancing and all the other requirements, put those in place, the logistics, the layout. We're going to need some time to do that I don't think we could run both of them at the same time and still do that. So just allowing that week to get things in order and then hit it live on Saturday, July 4th with the physical market. Another thing to note about that is there are still limitations as far as what we can do with like no music, no food demonstrations, a lot of those extra amenities and activities that are so popular with the farmers market. Unfortunately, we aren't able to put those in place yet, but we can get the vendors out there able to sell their produce and their product. So that's where we're at with that. We've been very flexible as COVID-19 requires of us, but I think we're starting to come out the other side and be able to get things kind of flowing in the more traditional capacity. Any questions on the farmers market?
Sounds good.
Okay. That's really all I had. The only other thing I was going to mention is that it is time to start working on our budget. So I'm starting to work on that now. I will be touching base with Jack as our treasurer and possibly getting our finance committee together. I know Karen and Nicole that you guys are serving on that committee as well, but I'll be looking to do that in the next few weeks.
Good. Well, Becky, do we have anyone in the waiting room for public comment?
We do not.
Thanks, Sean. So we will skip past public comment and just get to board member comment. And I'll just say your name. Karen, do you have any comments?
No.
Nicole?
All good.
Sean?
I'm good. It's great to see you guys. I enjoyed the Smith Group presentation. Looking forward to seeing the rest of it. Some interesting stuff on there.
Mm-hmm.
Have a great Thursday, everybody.
Thanks, Sean.
What about you, Jim?
Nothing except I liked all those trees on his plant.
That was so funny.
Tried telling you all these years, you guys wouldn't listen to me, especially Mana.
I remember.
And the TIF plan too. Have to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I think that'll be Becky's goal to try to
Yes.
figure out how to get TIF funds for 3rd Street. That's been #1 point of contention since I've been on this board too. So
Yes, high priority.
Well, I don't have any further comment. I guess we can adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you all for your time.
Becky, can you stay on for a second? I just got a question.
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, guys.
Becky, are we putting out baskets, flower baskets this year?
Yes, they're going